This is my CPA exam journey, part 2. So my disclaimer and copyright notice, the information and opinions in this presentation are those of the author only and not the author's employers or affiliated organizations, including but not limited to Irvine Valley College and the South Orange County Community College District. The presentation is for educational purposes only and does not constitute any legal or accounting advice whatsoever. This presentation is copyright 2008 to 2019 by Bennet. I encourage you to share this presentation and share links on an unmodified basis. If you decide to modify the presentation in any way, please email me prior to doing so at bennet1812@gmail.com to discuss. Note, I do not claim any copyright whatsoever in any companies or organizations mentioned in this presentation. Rather, the other parties are the owners of their respective copyrights. So here's my forward. So for years, I held on to my CPA exam test booklets. I'm gonna break the fourth wall right here, and I'm just gonna do a quick little video. So as you can see right here, these are my CPA exam booklets, from May of 1991. So I will both be having these linked up on my faculty website at IBC so you can check them out. Okay. So I found these in my garage, toys in the attic, and not the Aerosmith, but the accounting toys in the attic. And so right over here, I'm now going to be sharing my journey with you. So for me, I went to undergraduate. I was a business economics major at the University of California at Santa Barbara. And I was so fortunate to have many amazing instructors there, including Henry Sander, Don Loster, Kobe Harmon, and God, I just had great instructors. I'm probably forgetting some right now, but in any event, it was great because all of these instructors, they were all licensed CPAs, and they taught me with problem-based questions, which is something that I'm now continue to do as an accounting instructor. And so the other thing about UC Santa Barbara that was also really amazing is that I had basically the opportunity to become a teaching assistant. And what I was doing as a teaching assistant is I was leading 2-hour weekly discussion sections for both financial and managerial accounting. I did this for a full year, and this was by far one of the greatest. If you can teach accounting to somebody, this is just an amazing experience. And tutoring and teaching accounting is great. It is such a great way to go through and reinforce everything you've learned in the lower division courses. The other thing I want to mention too is I did not take all of the accounting courses that were being offered. I did take intermediate accounting. I did take individual and corporate taxation. I did take a business law class that was designed for accountants. And so I also took advanced accounting. I took auditing, but there was some like upper division cost accounting that I did not take. And again, as I said in the other video, is that if you don't take a particular class, it's okay. It's just going to be, it is what it is. I mean, you're just gonna have to spend more time on that particular part. So one of the things about UCSB, UC Santa Barbara, is that it's a very, very different school now. It's now very highly ranked academically. Most of the partying is done by parents who drop off their children at Santa Barbara City College, and they make the mistake of having them live in Isla Vista, and then they somehow drop out of Santa Barbara City College within about 6 months. So, and now today I was a business economics major, and at UCSB, they have something called economics accounting. However, that is a very, very stressful major because you need to take something called Econ 10A. And if I mention that course, I think to a few of my former students, they'll probably want to start drinking alcohol immediately to relieve the stress. However, UCSB is highly recruited from. Everybody loves recruiting from UCSB. It is a great accounting school. One of the things I will say though is that as time has evolved, and it's just because of that Econ 10A requirement, it's that UCSB is a great school, but also there's many other great accounting schools, including Cal State Fullerton. which I tend to generally recommend to like most students if they're considering going into accounting. No school is perfect, but again, when you're looking at accounting, you know, Santa Barbara is amazing. Cal State Fullerton is amazing. So let's look at a little bit about the CPA exam back in 1991. That's when I took it. So the exam was in 4 parts. Practice was broken down into 2 different 4.5-hour sections. It was over 3 days, and it was only offered twice per year. It was offered in May and November. There were no calculators. Yes, there was running water. There were cars. It was not a horse and buggy time. But it was one of those things that you took the exam in a big open room, and you sat down. There were proctors everywhere, and you would bring in your pencils. I think I had like probably 20 sharpened pencils in my 12 by 12 plastic bag with my ID and all my exam stuff. And the other thing was too, is that if you didn't pass the, you had to get a leg, which was, I think you could pass practice by itself. But if I just say just passed auditing alone and I didn't pass any of the other parts, the results would not count. So the key was you had to get a leg. And then once you had the leg, you could take the parts of the exam later on. So over here is that another thing too, is that, you know, when you see these names of practice, theory, audit, and business law, audit is really the only section that's today that is still intact. Practice, theory, and business law have become FAR, Reg, and BEC. The other kind of cool thing about the exam back in May of 1991 is that you could bring in stamps. And when you finished your exam, you would turn it in, but you could write your name on the test, and then you could write on your name on the test, and they would mail it to you. So I brought in like postage stamps, and I was able to mail the exams back to myself. And then what would happen is that the CPA review course that I took, they actually mailed me the multiple choice answers. So I was able to actually check my work and see how well I did on the test. So let's talk a little bit about CPA exam preparation. And this kind of links back to the other video I did. I took back then what was called the Mark Dauberman CPA review course. And Mark Dauberman actually now works for Roger Phillip. Roger Phillip was one of my instructors and he's actually probably one of my greatest teaching inspirations, just because Roger can actually make accounting fun, and that is a very hard thing to do. I would never want to follow him teaching anything, just because he is that good. So, but you know, when I was taking the CPA review course, I met for 8 hours every day on a Saturday. And so at UC Santa Barbara, I had to kind of take it easy on Friday nights, because on Saturdays I was riding my bike to school to study for the CPA exam. So I was literally there from like 8 to like 5 or 6 p.m. And, you know, it was one of those things that it was a lot of work. However, at the same time, it was live instruction, but given how complex the CPA exam is, and that's more the complexity in terms of the material that's being covered and how it's being covered, I think if you were to take live instruction, unless you were taking it from an instructor that really knew their stuff, you want to take it you'd rather take it in a computer type of environment. The other thing is I would also share with you as well is that what was really helpful for my CPA exam is because I had taken challenging courses, and because I had been a teaching assistant, and that meant that I resat in on the lectures for accounting, for financial and managerial accounting. And then every week I would be up there speaking for 2 hours to different students. That was by far something that really helped me prepare for the exam. So if you spent time in your accounting classes, it's going to make your life that much easier when it comes to actually taking the CPA exam. So one of the other things too is my roommate did not like me just because I was I was studying I wasn't one of the guys who goes to the library. I was doing most all of my studying at basically in my apartment, which was like a 1-bedroom. I think what also really motivated me too is my old roommate, his dad said, "Oh, you'll never pass all 4 parts at once. It's really hard to do." And in fact, it is very hard to do, but I kind of use that as my own personal motivation to actually do it. And the other reason why is I wanted to get it done prior to starting work. I had heard too many stories of different individuals who were taking the exam while they were working. And once you start working at a firm, you're going to be working a lot of hours. And so that's really why it was something that was really important to me to get done before I started my job. The other thing too is that now you can't sit for the exam until you actually have your bachelor's degree and then the 24 semester units of accounting subjects and then the 24 semester units of business subjects. But back when I took it, as long as you could get your diploma within 120 days of graduating, or excuse me, 120 days of taking the CPA exam, then you could basically become a CPA, or you could basically have the results count. So my exam was over 3 days. My first day that I took was practice. And one of the things that was really important, and this is I've kind of touched on this in the logistics, but when I was taking the exam over 3 days, I wanted to be nearby. And so a very good friend of mine, her parents were living in Redondo Beach. So I basically crashed at their place. I'm sure she would have liked to have taken the test in Carson instead of Pomona, where she ended up having to go. And it was one of those things that I was like being at home. They were extremely kind to me. I would, eat my breakfast and then drive over to Carson, take the exam and come back. So my first day was May 8th, 1991. So that exam went from, it was practice part 1. It was 4.5 hours. It started at 1:30 and it went till 6 p.m. So when I got there, my adrenaline was pumping, and that was actually probably one of the parts that I did the best on. And how do I know that? I was able to actually get the results back. And I did finish that day 30 minutes early, and so I kind of went back and I was feeling pretty good about it. On day 2 in the morning, I took auditing. Auditing went from 8:30 in the morning till noon. I left an hour early that day. I ended up getting a 75 on that part of the exam, which is part of the 300 club. But it was one of those things I probably should have stayed longer to check my work. But after that, I grabbed my lunch and then I went back to the exam for practice part 2, which started at 1:30 and then it went until 6 o'clock. So when I got to practice part 2, this is probably the greatest teaching moment I ever had for myself while taking the exam. So I sat down for practice part 2 and I got through the first 20 questions pretty easily. But when I got to question 21, I looked at this thing like, dude, I have no idea what this is. Like, oh, yikes. So then I skimmed and I was kind of looking at 21, 22, and I'm going to go back to the problems, because the problems for practice were in the back of the book. And these are now, I think these are like the task-based simulations. So I went back to the very back of the test book. Like I did those 2 questions, and that's where I got really lucky, because back then for Doberman CPA review, one of the instructors said, hey, you want to study this question, it's going to be on the exam. And sure enough, it was almost on the exam verbatim. And that's why you take a CPA review course, because they can give you those insights. The other thing I was really fortunate about is that the other question was something that I had actually graded when I was teaching, when I was being a teaching assistant for managerial accounting or cost accounting. And that was extremely lucky. Then I got back to the other questions, and I rechecked my work for the first 20. I rechecked my problems that I had done, and then I said, okay, now I'm going to go look at these questions. And I still had no idea about 40 of the multiple choice questions. This is 40 out of 60 multiple choice. Practice was set up as day 1 was 60 multiple choice and 2 problems. Day 2, it was 60 multiple choice and 2 problems. I believe the multiple choice are weighted at 0.5 point each, with the problems being 10 points each. So that's how you get your 100. So I go back to those questions I didn't know. And I said to myself, well, Bennett, if you've studied, which I did, and I don't know the answers to these questions, I'm going to guess that everybody else doesn't know either. And so I guessed, and I walked out of that exam. So I started at 1:30. I walked out at 4 o'clock. I finished 2 hours early. And what was very ironic is that when I got the results back, basically it said, oh, I graded my exam and I got like a 77. But then the review course basically said, oh, they're going to add 7 difficulty points on this because we don't even know the answers. So the CPA, what the AI CPA will do, and this is what's really important, is that they will throw questions on there that you've never seen. So if you see that, and this is really why it's so important that when you take this test, start with the questions that are easiest for you first. Because if you see something that you've never seen before, chances are no one else has ever seen it. So then go back and play like the guessing game. Make a Jeff Spicoli surfboard. Do what you're going to do on that Scantron, or in this case on the computer. So that's really what you want to go through and really kind of take a look at. So again, and then so I came back from that. I think I was kind of feeling like a little bit knocked out. I still felt pretty confident, but it was one of those things that was just really crazy. And by day 3, so the morning it was business law from 8:30 to noon. I walked out an hour early on that one. I ended up getting, I think, a 76 on that part. That was actually, again, business law. Got through that. And then the second one was the last part of the exam was theory. And basically for theory, that one, I also was done about an hour early. And then this is really for me, it was like when I got out of the exam, I felt like, my God, where are my parents? And where's my family? Where are my friends? Because I had just finished probably one of the toughest things of my being at the age of 21. This was brutal. This is something I just went through and did. And I spent all this time going through and studying for this exam. And it was extremely difficult. So I was really like, this is like my shining moment. Where is everybody to congratulate me? And this is kind of, I kind of like said, okay, I got back, I got in my car, which was a 1984 Toyota Tercel. Anybody who knows me imagines like, big guy, little car, fat guy, little coat from Tommy Boy. I was like a circus, like a car that pulls up to the circus and 1,000 clowns come out. So it was one of those things. So I drove back up to Isla Vista and I had a very good time that Friday night. Not sure if I really remember Saturday morning. After getting done with the CPA exam, it was kind of like I was taking 19 quarter units that spring semester, and I had kind of gone to all of my instructors and said, hey, dude, I'm taking your class, party, no party, please don't fail me. And what they kind of said to me was like, okay, then I had to do a lot of catch up. So those last few weeks, I really couldn't enjoy it. And, after going through and getting my results, and I knew I had done pretty well just because I knew I had passed the exam. I think really where I was kind of bummed out was that when I was walking through the graduation ceremony, it was just, I felt as though this wasn't the big significant event in my life. The big significant event in my life was passing the CPA exam. And that I knew I had done well enough, I think with the exception of auditing, which is a little bit dicey, but because I ended up getting an 84 on practice, a 78 on theory, 76 on law, and then a 75 on auditing. And so that was like the one part I really didn't really know. But it was going through the graduation, it was somewhat of a letdown for me, just because I really wish my friends and family would have been there to see, myself passing it. Now, the really good news that came out of this was that in August of 91, I got my results and I got a very nice letter, which again, I will put on my faculty website. And you can find the article I've written for this there is, and I got my notice that it was like, I passed the exam. I passed all 4 parts, and they wrote me a very nice letter, which again, I'll also include there with the exam. So, and what I would share with you is that if you're one of my students, and if you're, okay, so first off, if you pass the exam and you've never taken me before and you let me know, I will send you a big congratulations, right? And I'll be, and so if you're, but if you've taken me as a student for financial accounting, managerial accounting, or intermediate accounting, and you pass the exam, you let me know, and I will buy you a bottle of your choice. Arash, I still owe you a bottle of whiskey. As my students, the proud, I feel so proud of my students when they pass the exam, because I know how hard it is. A lot of people don't really understand how tough this exam is. It's incredibly difficult. It's harder than the bar exam because you're coming down to a quantifiable answer. It's really, really tough, but it's, and if I did it over 19 and a half hours over 3 consecutive days, just think about it for yourself. You're going to be there for 4 hours. Make the most of that 4 hours. You can totally do it. And I'll never forget one of my former students, Joanne Sanchez. She had passed the exam she had practiced FAR with a score of 86. And she said, haha, Tchaikovsky, I got you. And I said, well, Joanne, just remember that I took, all 4 parts of the exam at once. And then she got quiet all of a sudden. And I'm still very extremely proud of her, but it's one of those things that you can do it. When I would tell the CPAs, I often have in my classroom, I have CPA exam representatives come in and talk to my students. And when I told those reps that I took and passed all 4 parts of the exams in one sitting, they look at me like, dude, you're insane. And the answer was I was. But I hope this works for you in terms of an inspiration, because yes, you can pass the CPA exam. You can do it. A lot of people have been in your place beforehand. The key is you have to sit down and focus and study. And if you follow these guidelines, I think you're going to be okay. But in any event, I want to thank you for joining me here on this video today. I will put a link to my faculty website so you can see the article, as well as my former the notices I got from the CPA exam from the California Board of Accountancy. And I want to thank you for watching today. Please send any questions or comments you have to 1812cpa@gmail.com, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Have a great one.